Sometimes MMO players, like the rest of the human population, are faced with the big choices in life.
Switch on.
For us though, this is usually about the time we hit the character creation screen. Which one of these hairlines is the one I wish I had? Do I want to play as the gender that's allowed to expose their nipples or the one that's not? Should I really make my character look that edgy? But more than any other question, they're usually asking themselves, which of these races is truly the superior one? We all collectively agree it's not the elves by nature of the fact that no matter what game you play, their species has no males, and their only versatile role in any group is as a place for everyone else to store their weapons. Orcs, dwarves, and even humans are all good options. But what if there's a fantasy race that's been there all this time that we've just been neglecting? A race so strangely familiar that you might even mistake it for something that might have existed once upon a time on our planet. The Japanese. There's a considerable amount of lore surrounding these mystical creatures, and even a decently sized fan base of people who wish they were real and attempt very poorly to roleplay as them. The only thing that remains consistent across all of their roleplays is never having any sex. But what if there was a region-locked game that attempted to answer the question, where would we be if Oppenheimer never helped in the construction of 2 strategically airdropped rice cookers? This is a third-person, action combat, generic 3D anime graphics MMO filled with more shoeless underage girls than Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon shows. A game in which you play as a gaijin. Wait, no, hold on. A Raijin, otherwise known as a filthy outsider who somehow got magically transported into another world in a totally unique and definitely not generic isekai anime story. Oh, what's that? You don't know what an isekai is? Well, don't worry, I've had to binge watch a few Chinese cartoons myself ever since every other Western form of entertainment media keeps trying to shove its bullshit political take down my throat. So now I'm an expert on the topic. Google search and watch Boku no Pico, and you'll have all the answers you're looking for. In the meantime, we're here in the world of Regnus, as in Reckonus dick gonna fit down your throat. And we're here to pick herb, kill boar, and pick rock that you thought was herb, all in pursuit of one day recovering the memories of your past war crimes. Everyone in this game is either a racist, a time traveler, underage, or an underage time-traveling racist. Everyone is also a gambling addict, but we'll get to that later. Oh yeah, and there's also something about cleansing the world of the dark ones, because according to this game, if your skin is below a certain tone on the color spectrum, that's a bad thing.
What are you doing there?
Sir, I'm not black.
But I'm pretty sure that last part's not too important. At its core, this game's story is all about learning that when you fuck with time travel, sometimes time travel fucks you back. But Rose, I hear the bleating of an innocent little lamb who still thinks that the Pirate Bay is a fan page for the exploits of Blackbeard. This game hasn't been released in the West yet. It's only currently available inside the borders of that one island nation that keeps putting used underwear in vending machines. And yes, I know that, but Bandai Namco doesn't, because as far as they're concerned, I am glorious Nippon citizen folded 1,000 times by societal pressure, just like everyone else playing that one game that isn't Honkai Star Rail. And I accomplished this all through the simple click of this one button. Before we go any further, I want to make this clear. I went through 3 other VPNs, all of which ended up in my accounts being banned, except for this one, which for some reason slipped under the wire. On top of that, despite my man on the inside's best efforts to get some kind of sponsorship going, no deal was struck. And I had to pay for this shit with my own hard-earned money. Wait, no, that's not right. With these guys' hard-earned money that they give me for some reason. And as you can see, lads, I'm using your money wisely. Why wouldn't they sponsor me, you ask? You'd think it would have something to do with the words coming out my mouth, but no. It's because, and I abbreviate, you're not shitting out 25 videos a day, and therefore can summarily fuck off. I even tried to get one of those little codes that at least gets you a discount, but that didn't happen either. What this also means, though, is that I am free to call Andrew Lee's mother, tell her that he is a very mean man and that he won't give me any of his money even though I like their product. This would be the part of the video where I'm supposed to tell you to click some special link in the description, but I have nothing to sell you. So instead, if you look in the description, you'll find a guide on how to set this all up yourself so you too can ruin the Blue Protocol experience before it releases in the West sometime in the next decade. Don't tell your mom or your local FBI agent about this, but this will probably work for other region lock games that are coming out in the future. Now let's get something straight. I am not, nor have I ever been, a Genshin Impact player. So my ability to review this game is solely reliant on other similar MMORPG experiences I have and several boomerisms, dating all the way back to when gaming was good. So if you came here expecting someone who was going to tell you that the age of consent is too high, well then you're shit out of luck. This game relies on several never-before-seen gameplay mechanics which it uses to obscure the vision of any international oversight committee that are unfairly trying to prevent children from getting addicted to gambling. Everything in this game is a smaller game of chance, where getting what you want means buying more tickets to the arcade, and getting what you need to progress means having to play the game at a far slower pace than people with credit cards who are actually supposed to have access to this game right now. And when I say everything, I do mean everything except, weirdly enough, the Pokemon badges that stand in for gear that you would otherwise equip in any other MMO. Why would the Japanese have committed such an atrocity? Well, that way visible gear can be fully cosmetic and need to be obtained through grinding adventure boards, buying a battle pass every 2 months, or rolling the dice, praying to Orange Jesus, and spending money on the gacha system. Ooh, look how sparkly it all is when she yanks my crank until something comes out. And are there superior pay-to-win abilities and or mounts locked away in both the gambling systems and the cash shop? Yes, but it's like they say, never ask a woman her weight, a man his salary, or the Japanese what happened at Nanking. But what you can ask me about is the gameplay and story, so let's talk about that instead. This game does something very Japanese by forcing you to work and play the combat tutorial before you're even born. You don't even know what your character looks like, so instead you play as a ghost so white that a loaf of bread would be considered spicy to them. What this tells me is that this game is looking to integrate you particularly into the story of a world about invading immigrants before anything else, and that cutscenes in this game are directly relevant to the character you choose to play. Now, lesser beings out there will go right ahead and compare this game to Dark Souls without first checking to see if the thought they've been impregnated with has fetal alcohol syndrome or not. In reality, this game is closer to a mix between New World with its action combat system, Albion Online with its instanced world shenanigans, and Devil May Cry 3 with its one-track story that's meant to make you feel special on the inside. And yes, I am aware that I could have pulled out a Final Fantasy reference here, but I choose not to, in hopes of upsetting you. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This tutorial ends with a Mexican antagonist penetrating our white boy chest like it's an undefended border, sending us off to the character creator screen. Now, when picking our character that's to be transported from another world into this one, we're bound to the same logic and laws as any of those other Vietnamese animated drawings out there that people keep blasting rope over, which means picking either someone who got the Paul Walker treatment but from the outside of the vehicle, or that one service where someone from Texas installs new ventilation holes in our body for free with their problem begone stick. And since this game is going to be a monumental fucking task for me since everything is in Japanese, I'll have to continually switch between installing unofficial English patches and using Mort since I haven't quite figured out how kanji works yet. So why not honor the legacy of another man who took on the impossible task of trying to get men to tolerate and have sex with 3D women instead of 2D ones, and their corresponding figurines, only to be rewarded for his efforts by taking a high school science project to the spine. What I'm trying to say is the character creator in Blue Protocol is nothing special. It's mostly a bunch of preset options and some color pickers, where you can choose to play as generic Japanese man above the age of consent, generic anime protagonist child who doesn't know what consent is, jerk-off material, or not jerk-off material unless you're planning to spend time in prison. None of what you see here can be considered new or innovative, but the female character models have acceptable levels of personality and the objectively correct amount of jiggle physics applied to them. So all of this I can consider forgivable, if not possible. Oh, by the way, expect that and a few other features to be removed from the Western version of the game, but if you think for a second that the core gameplay itself will be so different when compared to the version currently playable amongst the rice fields, then I don't have a bridge to sell you. I have several bridges to sell you, and they're all NFTs. But after I'm done recreating Japanese Please Have Sex Man in his final moments on Earth, we enter the game only to be violently attacked once more by a cutscene that makes about as much sense as my character class choice. One could say this is some real cock and ball torture. They didn't even remove the cock and balls. My god, it looks like that one PC building company logo. By the way, there's only 5 classes to choose from, at least for now, and they're all tied to your weapon choice. A sword and shield for tanking dealing damage, combo axes in case you prefer fighting games over MMOs, a bow and arrow for damage and healing through the ancient art of embedding pointy objects into everyone else except yourself, a stick for pretending you're doing something, and another bigger stick related to the most important MMORPG class every game needs: balls. But don't worry, if you messed up and accidentally didn't pick balls during the character creation, you can always transition into something better by swapping your weapon later in game. Your class is tied to whatever wacky shit you've got in your hands today, and not how bad of a person you are on the inside. Anyway, back to the cutscene. What is very obviously a fully grown woman cuts in front of us in the line at Costco.
Officer, please. This is a victimless crime. She told me she was a 20 million-year-old demon. How was I supposed to know any better?
We get a second combat tutorial and oh, I get it now. I was looking at this weapon backwards. It's not a dick and balls at all.
It's an oversized crack pipe.
In the second tutorial, we learn how awesome we used to be as a white person and how much we now suck by comparison, because all we can focus on is left-clicking to hit things and pressing ARPG buttons to activate our one ability. I mean, imagine being nerfed so hard that all of a sudden you need a HUD in your life, just so you can figure out when you've sufficiently inverted the enemy's organs. And just when you think it's over, congratulations, you are now a slave. How did this happen? You mistook a legally binding document for an autograph. This is the point in time when your story truly begins, or ends depending on your tolerance for grind. It's also where I'm gonna stop talking about the story before I upset all the weebs by giving them spoilers. So let's switch our focus to the gameplay of Blue Protocol instead. And when it comes down to it, there's not a lot to worry about unless you plan on doing damage or playing solo. And considering the fact that any interaction I have with another player was me risking a ban before understanding how this game worked, that's exactly what I had to do. Which means for me, this game is divided up into leveling, fighting supposed enemy insurgents on foreign soil for both my amusement and their body parts, gathering and crafting. So how then do you level up in Blue Protocol? By completing any infinite number of side quests that reward us with money and XP, following the main quest line that rewards us with XP and money, or completing these things called adventure boards, where the devs very graciously didn't bother wasting your time by making this part of the story, main quest line, or feel meaningful and important in any way at all. Oh, but by the way, don't fall for the same white boy trap that I did that the Japanese have set out for you. Do you see this little red banner at the bottom of this board? Well, if you don't see it, then it's not being tracked, and if it's not being tracked, then any progress you do towards that board is not counted. Why can this game not just auto-track each and every single adventure board at the same time? Why are the amounts of side quests arbitrarily limited so I can't just pick up all of them at once and batch complete them? It's to increase the odds of you finding your way into the gambling section of the menu while you're trying to figure out why the fuck this game is trying its best to artificially extend your playtime from a few hours into a few months. At least the visuals and aesthetics of this game are pretty good looking, so when you're running through the Minister Hills for the millionth time, it doesn't feel nearly as bad as it could. And that's another thing to keep in mind. Because of all these limitations on the quests and the pickups in the adventure boards, Blue Protocol has you running back and forth to the same area multiple times on different quests that want the same things from you. Either you have to kill something or collect something, watch a short cutscene, or read some unvoice acted text before rinse repeating ad infinitum. But what do you collect and how do you kill? Well, let's start with the former. See that shiny light in the distance? That's a gathering node. And in Broken Prostate, there's only two types of shiny thing to gather. Either it's rock and stone or leaves and weeds. There's no gathering skill or leveling system associated with picking shit up off the ground, so you can turn your brain off for a few seconds and just hit the interact key. That is, except for fishing, which has its own little unique special system that feels good for about the first 20 minutes and then feels annoying for the rest of your life. I would say that there's not much depth to the systems in Big Pickup over here, but that implies that there's any depth at all. Technically speaking, there are only two resources to gather. They look exactly the same, and every time you interact with a node, it's another roll of the dice to see if you get what you want or complete trash. By contrast though, the combat has a decent amount of depth to it, and as I mentioned before, your class is tied to your weapon, and your weapon can have 4 active abilities at any given time. This doesn't mean though that you've only got 4 abilities total. You also get an ultimate ability, and as you level up you gain access to more abilities tied to your weapon class that you can swap out depending depending on how you're feeling. These abilities also continue to improve just as your level does, unlocking new effects and improving on older ones. And there's even some variation on the combo attacks your weapon does depending on what directional key you're pressing. That is, of course, assuming you chose the right weapon and not any of the 3 wrong ones.
Yeah, you heard me right. I don't consider magic stick in this game to be a weapon.
But now that we've covered weapons and gathering, we can talk about the crafting systems that only serve to deepen the combat systems and nothing else. Crafting overall relies on grinding out materials you need from the open world and from instance dungeons. All crafting works in the same way. You just need to go to the right crafting bench. Select what you want and craft it with the click of a button, assuming you've spent the appropriate amount of weeks grinding out any materials you need. Not only that, but when crafting any weapon in particular, there's again a biased gambling system involved, and you can modify your chances of getting a better weapon if you just so happen to be holding a ticket that changes the odds of the craft. So you can either bribe the crafting bench to give you what you want with a piece of paper, or play the odds, lose, get mad, and uninstall the game with your fists. But I'd like you to remember that 99% of all gamblers quit just before they're about to hit it big. So don't let that be you. Take a loan out on that property you don't own. Get it repossessed because it was never yours in the first place. Keep on that grind, player. By pure statistical volume of chance, you're bound to win something eventually, right? The only crafting that has any form of variation is the weapon enhancements themselves, that work like Path of Exile gems if none of them were ever linked and only gave basic stat variations when filled. These weapon enhancements are called plugs, and for you to insert a plug, your weapon needs to be of an appropriate type and have an open, gaping socket waiting to be filled. If it just so happens that your weapon has no open slots, then don't worry. You can always take her to the local engineer and he'll stretch her out for you, assuming you can pay him for his time. The other parts of crafting involve making consumables, the Pokemon badges that I previously spoke about, and crafting something called Imagines.
This system will probably have an even dumber name in the Western release.
Imagines are basically summons. Once crafted, you can equip them and gain 2 more abilities to play around with. These can range from simple buffs to outright damage. There's a ton of these to try out, so find out what works for your playstyle. But if you want the best of the best, then be prepared to burn through your bank account to get the recipe you need, either directly or indirectly through the in-game gambling systems. Are we starting to get the picture of what this game's about yet, Kimosabi? Once you've got all those basics down and memorized, you can now truly experience the joys of the action combat systems, either out in the instanced world or within the instanced world. And I can tell you right now, this is my favorite part of this game. Controls are responsive, abilities feel good to use, and the animation lock on any of your moves isn't overly sluggish or annoying. And if you're an elite pro gamer hacker like me and know how to use the dodge button, you should, in theory, be able to take on any enemy regardless of their health bar. But that's only in theory. The reality of the situation, however, is that the Japanese want revenge for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they're getting it by fucking up some of the finer joys of a good action combat system. If an enemy is out of your combat level range, you do reduce damage to them. And by reduced, I mean reduced to 0. And that means you're not ever going to get into that epic boss fight out in the open instanced world just because a regular mob is 10 levels higher than you, and you have to rely on your skill. Instead, you can expect to have that boss fight with one of the open world bosses that spawn every now and then. The only problem being that these open world bosses aren't a fight, they're a Zerg fest, since everyone around you is also looking for kill credit. Now, in a previous video, I told you that one of the problems with the Guild Wars 2 combat systems is the overly flashy graphics going on. But if that game was enough to give you epilepsy, this one's gonna give you sunburn through your monitor and a stroke. What the fuck is going on? Am I even hitting the boss? But why are we doing all of this? Why are we here? What is the point of Blue Protocol? Just like any other MMORPG, it is to progress. It is to grow and develop as a person, to mentally evolve from having a hobby into having a problem, and to, of course, reach the end game where the real game begins. Now, most modern MMOs out there despise the fact that they have to work around a leveling system, but Blue Protocol actually does a decent job of taking you on a story-based journey whenever it's not forcing you to grind out collecting 35 goblin foreskins from a dungeon you've already done 25 times for your next weapon upgrade, or an adventure board that's actively limiting your progress for no reason at all. You get to meet new characters along the way, learn a little bit more about the world around you and even get taken through each and every dungeon, so you already know what you have to do when you have to come back here and sprint your way through these undertuned instances later when you're in a group. Blue Protocol is a weird amalgamation of the worst parts of MMO progression, like the fact that the visual elements of your character have no correlation to the power of your character, or that you're going to be spending a decent portion of your time killing the same mob over and over again at some bottleneck in the game where everyone is doing the exact same as you. And that's all mixed in with some of the best parts of MMO progression, like cutscenes, significant quests, and a story that directly integrates your character into the world around them. There seems to be no middle ground here. It's either very good or very bad. But then what's the end game like? Well, I can't tell you. Not because I don't want to, but because I finally ran into an MMO player's most dangerous and undefeatable boss that the game has to offer. The adventure board tried to make me make friends, which means it is literally impossible for me to progress any further in this game. Who in their right mind plays an MMORPG to make friends and be social? So cutting things short, if you're looking to just know the good and the bad of Blue Protocol, here it is. Starting with the good, Bipolar Proctologist has some of the best and smoothest action combat I've seen in an MMO game to date. Weapon and class choice might be scarce at the time of this review and at the time of Western release, but they do mostly feel good and polished to use. Not only that, but every now and then, you're required to apply some lateral thinking by using environmental factors to your advantage or avoiding direct hazards. The aesthetics and visuals of this game aren't just nice to look at, but also mean the game is going to age better than if they were just chasing after high graphical fidelity and nothing else. The musical score is pretty fantastic, if a little limited in quantity, and the in-game story and lore are well made, directly affect your character, and are interesting to experience, assuming you either install an unofficial English patch or know how to read 2-minute noodles. I would personally recommend that if you're not planning on immigrating to Japan through the use of a VPN, then when this game does release in the West, that you at least try it out since it is free to play. As a bonus, you're more likely to actually have fun running around this world, the less seriously you take the game itself. But now for the bad. At its core, Broke Potato is another gambling-riddled Asian Skinner box MMORPG intended to siphon as much wealth out of the pockets of its players as possible. Even at a simple glance of how their cash systems work, it's very easy to see that you could end up spending well over $1,000 before getting the thing you want. This game also lacks depth, and if you're not here for scantily clad women that don't talk back or decent action combat, then you're not likely to enjoy what this game has to offer. For reference, the crafting and gathering systems of this game are not deep or varied at all, and there's no in-game economy to speak of, no weapon durabilities or nuances, and only minor variations in weapon builds and playstyles outside of ability swapping. You're not going to find talent trees or specializations anywhere here either. Additionally, combat even in dungeons can be fun and challenging solo, but once you're doing them as a group, it becomes all about zerging down the mobs and bosses faster than they can even get their abilities off to stop you. So overall, based on my experience in Blue Protocol so far, I'd say this game is going to fall into one of two futures. Either it will gather a massive audience of weebs that drops off to next to nothing over its first few months after release because it's something fun and new to play for a little while before you get bored, and you go back to playing some other anime-inspired game with deeper systems attached to it. Or it'll build a long-term niche audience of weebs in the West that keeps it alive enough through the gambling systems that the game can justify its continued existence under the benevolent wing of Amazon for at least a few years, which is hopefully enough time for them to add more weapons and content into the game so it can continue its survival. That is, of course, assuming the Western release doesn't remove all the best features that Bunda Protocol has to offer. The biggest problem that this game is facing, in my always correct opinion, is that it's trying to emulate the slow grind and climb that you'd find in something like classic WoW, but it's missing all the nuance, novelty, and detailing that you would have gotten out of a game like classic WoW. And at the end of the day, I, just like you, have been tricked into thinking that this game is an actual MMORPG when it's closer to a third-person ARPG with shared instanced world progression. So what score do I assign to Blue Protocol? I give it a full please be 18 out of always check for an ID.
Now, I have no idea how to end this video, so you need to leave now. Not just because a loan shark is trying to repossess my kneecaps after getting absorbed in the gacha system of Blue Protocol, but also because I have a Twitch speedrun ban to plan.
So as always, big thank to all my subscribers, both old and new. And a special thank to the Gambling Encouragement Association, who get to watch this video before anyone else, decide what short I make next, and this time around assisted me in finding most of the memes you saw in this video. Your unpaid labor is always appreciated. More content soon. Bye.